And somebody just said, how do you know, like really know when you've offered something? And I want to go to that for a moment because I think it's important. I talk about this a lot, that it's easy to intellectually do things here because we're taught in this culture to intellectually do everything, like you think about it, but it really doesn't have anything to do with what's happening on the inner somatic, deep levels of the being. It's just a mental idea. So it becomes like, oh yeah, I've offered my job to love, or oh yeah, I've offered my body to love, but it really hasn't made a deeper connection. So when the person wrote that and they said, how do you know? How do you know when a real offering has occurred? I thought, let me talk about it for a minute, because part of what you may be doing under these transits is this act of offering, giving it over to something greater than just the identification with the small self. Offering is the key to doing it. So, well, actually, I'll give you an example. For me, a lot of the passage that I've been in, as many of you know, throughout Saturn and Capricorn, has been this story with my body and with the swelling in my knees that kept preventing me from being the usual active athletic person that I am. And the process over and over, because since December of 2017, when Saturn went into Capricorn, I had, a few months at a time where I was dealing with this intense contraction, not being able to walk or not being able to work out. Then it would go away for a while, then it would come back. And so I was in that diastolic back and forth and back and forth. And what has happened now, it literally has pushed me through a birth canal where, ironically, now that we're getting to the end of Saturn in Capricorn, it seems that the answer to what has caused this all along, this systemic candida, is finally getting addressed, and I'm finally on a diet that's working with it. But as some of you know, with candida, you get the back and forth of, you have periods of die-off where your symptoms seem to get worse, and then you have periods where you're so much better. And the lesson is to just keep going as you work with your body clearing out the candida. But for me, this has all become a map of my own transmutation of offering. Because, if you could say, oh, well, the real purpose of life is just to get what I want. To get what I want is to be able to be biking and doing yoga. Well, that's not really true once you're living a life of offering. The purpose of life isn't only for me to get that. The purpose of my life is to know how to live in a state of moving with the flow and having everything that's the highest for my soul to understand in this lifetime, to have all that absorbed so that nothing in this life goes to waste, so that I'm really rising to what the soul wants to know this life. And so I think that's an old soul agenda. That's what a lot of souls are here to know how to do. Not just how do I get what I want, even if what you want is great, but also how do you work with those periods where you don't get that gratification right away? And how do you work with that? Or there's just this learning of the soul to learn surrender, to learn how to be with what is, not because of passivity, not because of any of that or being a doormat, but because there's times there's nothing that can be done but to let something be until it's time to know the next step. And so this has been like the crucible that I've been living in since 2017, is that, back and forth of periods of contraction, opening up, periods of contraction, opening up. I've been going forward with it, and then all of a sudden in the last week, when these transits started to come, I hit a period, I'm assuming it's die-off, where everything feels very inflamed again. But what I can feel is the difference on the mental plane so different than 2017, where I'm just letting it be. There's no longer this feeling of like, oh, I've got to change this. Oh my God, I've got to be able to be back on the bike tomorrow. It's been offered over and over through these last 3 years. And so now when it happens, it's like, okay, it's what's happening. It doesn't make me thrilled, but it's what's happening. And there's this spaciousness of letting it be. And I would also say worry of a certain kind, it just goes away because the worry is coming out of the identification with the small self beliefs and, there's no room. Eventually it gets crowded out just by the spaciousness of being in it. And it can be very practical, because offering is not passivity. It can be very practical. So there can be this feeling as I'm in it of, okay, divine, is there anything left here? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything that I'm having that I shouldn't be having? Is there anything? So there's always part of that offering is show me the actions or bring me the information, whatever's occurring. But if not, let me be with this as the process unfolds. And that's what I feel that many people who are here that are really living from offering now will say that to you. You start to feel that sense of spaciousness because what's leaving is that my burden, my needs, my money, my fame, my ambition, my partner, whatever, all those my's that create all that endless contraction and exhaustion and hopelessness. The my starts dissolving. So I would simply say that's how you know. The dissolving of the my, the dissolving of worry, the sense of spaciousness starting to come. And it's just a process. So wherever you are in that, don't worry about it. You just go back to, okay, this is being offered up for the highest, for the soul's highest expression. Let everything I'm meant to learn from this occur. So, anyway, it was funny because a friend of mine this morning, she said, if I was going through this, that you're going through as an athlete with your body, I'd be losing my mind. And I was like, I was losing my mind in 2017, but now as I hit patches of it, it's so different because that all starts to get burnt away. It doesn't mean you wouldn't prefer it, but the spaciousness starts to come in such a different way. And you may be able to apply this to any area of your life. If you've been on the planet for 2020 and you've been living this way, I guarantee you this has started to happen to you for some topic or another. And that's offering. That's true offering. That's how it occurs. And when somebody says, well, I've offered something and I didn't get what I wanted. In fact, for a while, something quote unquote worse came. That happens sometimes in order to break up all of the crusty attachments that say it has to go this way. And if it doesn't, I'm just going to have a tantrum for months. Over time, as you do the offering, while you're going through those crusty attachments, they start to break up. They start to soften. Flexibility starts to come in. I feel like there's been a massive Saturn-Pluto when they came together in January. They were the breaking up of all of this encrusted energy that said, my life has to go this way or I'm doing something wrong. That's been the great lie of a culture that said, the secret is if you only, could manifest everything you wanted, then you're a perfected being. It's like, this is the great lie. when you have transits like we've had that hasn't been about manifesting what the ego wants. It's been about how to break up all of that hardened attachment that says my way or the highway, and actually open to a plan that's coming from the great self and not the egoic self. So, that's how I think it goes. Makes this work very pertinent right now, as long as it's not misunderstood with passivity, which it sometimes is. All right, now let me go on from that.